Good evening, everyone. My name is Derrickson Lawrence, and I chair the Westchester County Homeowners Coalition. That organization, in conjunction with Wartburg, are pleased to bring you this healthcare town hall this evening. Okay, we've heard a lot of phrases over the last 6 months or so. Those that have been very popular have been resistance, fight back, don't take away my ACA. And in large measure, those have been very effective. In terms, we've seen the GOP's mantra have gone from repeal and replace for the last 7 years, and most recently we hear it repeal, repair, and replace. We've also seen that it's been somewhat effective, obviously, in what came back with the most recently announced GOP bill. And that what we're hearing is from the very right that what has come about has actually been Obama light, if you will. So that kind of approach is certainly effective, and we believe that will continue and should continue. It's what I call the third arm of government, the voice of the people. So that's effective, that should continue. The reason I raise this point is what we want to do here this evening is something in parallel to this, but somewhat different. What we hope to do is unpack the information, share this information with you, engage these panel members, so that we can all be proactive rather than reactive, and at the end of the discussion, really focus on how do we go forward, and how do we go forward particularly in New York State. So the way in which we'll proceed here is we'll have two segments for this. The first will focus on the elephant in the room, and that's what happened. That is what happened most recently with the new GOP bill. We will begin with the first speaker, but I'm going to call Angela to come forward and just announce those panel members, and then we will go forward with that. Angela Simonello, please.
Hi, as Derrickson said, I'm Angela Simonello. I'm the Vice President of Development and Marketing here. So if you think Gettner is hard to pronounce, Simonello is actually spelled with a C. So welcome to our campus. We're so happy to see you here. So as Derrickson said, I'd like to welcome our panelists and our moderators. Mr. David Robinson is an investigative reporter with the Journal News. Derrickson Lawrence from the Westchester County Homeowners Coalition will also be moderating tonight's event. Panel members include Dr. Dan O'Connell from Montefiore Medical Group, also part of Physicians for a National Health Program. Dr. Alan Tolles, Vice President, OBGYN, Long Island Jewish Medical Center, and Mr. David Gettner, the President and CEO of Wartburg. There'll also be guest speakers, Mr. Kevin Dahill, the CEO from New York State Suburban Hospital Alliance, and Ms. Kristen Mooney, am I saying that right?
Correct.
Yes.
Kristen Mooney.
From Montefiore, Bronx, the Senior Director of Health Policy. So welcome and thank you so much for being part of our panel tonight. If you have any questions, we are passing out index cards just to keep it flowing and not repeat questions. So if you didn't get an index card and you do have a question, there are people who are passing them out. If you just want to raise your hand, those that have an index, those who are passing them out, so you know who to kind of look for. Thank you. And then we'll collect them again and get your questions up in front of the panel. Restrooms are located out these doors through the second set of doors on your right. So enjoy and thank you again for coming.
Okay. So we are ready for our first speaker, our guest speaker, Mr. Kevin Dahill. Let me tell you just two sentences about Mr. Dahill. He wears a few hats right now. He presides over 2 regional associations. He's president of the Nassau Suffolk Hospital Council and also the Northern Metropolitan Hospital Association. This is the umbrella for those 2 regions are called the New York State Hospital Alliance. He is also the Executive VP of the Healthcare Association of New York State. He's been in Washington for the last 2 days, actually just got off the plane today, and he's here with us. So please welcome Mr. Kevin Dahill.
On the commercial insurance side, there's a negotiation. So healthcare in this country has been transactional. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that a hospital or a hospital system sits down with an insurer and negotiates price. And the reason why you've seen consolidation of hospitals is because the bigger they can get, the more of a critical mass they can represent, the better deal they can drive for themselves. Why is that important to them? And it sounds crass and businesslike. Well, on the government side, Medicaid does not pay costs for services. So hospitals, on average, get about 80 cents, 85 cents on the dollar for the care of Medicaid patients. Medicare is a little bit better. It's about 95 cents. So you got to make that up somewhere. So they seek to make that up in the prices that they negotiate with the commercial insurers. And that's the way it's been working here in New York State for several years. Okay? Now let's talk about the Affordable Care Act. And let me begin by saying that when the final bill was negotiated for the Affordable Care Act, we came out in support of it. And we contributed money to it. And I'll explain what I mean. Why did we come out and support it? Well, we were lamenting for years, the hospitals were, that when patients would arrive in our emergency room for conditions they probably should have been seen in a doctor's office and maybe could have been prevented and didn't have coverage, we had to take care of them. And there's a federal law that says anybody that walks into any emergency room has to be treated and stabilized, regardless of their ability to pay. That's fine. That's the moral and ethical thing to do. But we were lamenting for years that we had a sizable number of people that were coming into the emergency rooms that couldn't pay. And we took care of them. So now comes along a new initiative out of the government that says, we want to place on the books a law that is going to seek.
And I hear a lot from reporting. This touches on it, is the pre-existing condition issue. We didn't really, I saw it on the slide, but didn't really touch on that. Where does that come into the discussion here? That's what I hear a lot of people saying. One of the biggest concerns that they had was losing the ability for someone who has cancer or pre-existing high-cost illness, what this is going to do to them and how they benefited under the Affordable Care Act.
So pre-existing conditions is one of those things that can't be repealed through reconciliation, right? If you're following the presentation, it doesn't have a budgetary impact to the federal government, so it can't be used with the method that they want to use to pass ACA repeal, so that's going to stay in.
But economically, is that realistic based on
It's a great question. It's a great question. It's hard to know how that models, right, what that effect really is in the individual market. I think it'll be helpful once we have the Congressional Budget Office present their analysis of what the legislation would do, both from a coverage and spending perspective. I think that'll help us start to think about the quantification of that.
I have a question over here. Oregon from out of left field. I live in New Rochelle. I have a friend right here in the Meadowview. My son came down with diabetes. He called me from the emergency room. He's 25 years old, so I'm kind of still in charge here. Asked me to get him some metformin. And I shopped around, and I found out I could pay up and down Main Street in New Rochelle, probably the same in Mount Vernon, $321.94 or $14, depending on where I just popped in. But my question to the panel is, my state senator, George Latimer, said if gas stations pulled this, the state would shut them down. This kind of whipsawing is horrible and unethical. You can trust your pharmacist, maybe for the ingredients, but certainly not with your wallet.
As we bump up to the closing hour of 9 o'clock, I want to try to come back to an issue that was raised earlier on prescription drug prices. I think we all recognize that both the HCA, as it stood, over the last 8 years, did not address it adequately, and the new bill certainly doesn't address it. So the question that I have here is this. You indicated that Medicare or Medicaid today doesn't allow for negotiating those. Considering that we are going in the direction of more powers to the states, I want to propose the following. Number one, do panel members agree that this is a particular issue that requires further study and effort, lowering prescription drug prices? Let me just hear from each one of you very quickly. And would you be open to participating or continuing this discussion as a working group to look at ways to lower prescription drug prices in New York State in methods that are not being considered now? And the reason I'm saying this is when I look at some of the bills that are proposed today to do so, and I look at what Governor Cuomo has proposed recently, much of that focuses on setting prices or looking at ways to impose penalties if you go over those prices. And I have seen very little that looks at means that takes it down through competition, as the gentleman raised earlier, whether it's competition or whether it's importing it from other places or other ways to actually take it down through capitalistic means you just raised. So these are things that are not being considered now. And I'm wondering whether panel members would be interested in pursuing a dialogue on that beyond this convention. Please answer that.
I can just make the comment. I think some of that works for especially generic drugs, and this is where we see, whether it's the Target $4 formulary or Walmart or CVS or Medicaid for generic drugs. This is where I've seen the market be very successful, where you can get lots of drugs for $10 for 9 months.
And you would need some sort of government regulation there, because these companies, the pharmaceutical companies, they make the product, they have a patent on it for X amount of years, and they can sell it at the price that they set on it because nobody else can make it but them. Now, once the patent goes away, in my business, we see that with oral contraceptives. They put out a product and no other company can make it for X amount of time, and then all of a sudden, when that patent expires, now the price drops down dramatically because now it's generic. So unless you have some sort of government regulation over the companies that make these products, you're going to have this disparity in cost.
I think you raised a really great point that we need new policy solutions, because everything that's been put forth at this point for the past decades haven't been successful for a variety of reasons. But I also don't want us to lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of single-source generics that are increasing rapidly. We're seeing 800% year-over-year increases for generic drugs, but there's only one manufacturer. So competition in the generic market is also incredibly important as well.
Very good point.
I think it is an excellent point. I think that I've always been fascinated. Hospitals are buildings, and the physicians are really the ones that order the medications on behalf of the patients. So I think we'd have to get the medical societies involved in this as well.
Second to labor and food, it's the biggest cost. So it's a big deal. We don't really have the ability to influence it all that much. To the doctor's point, talk about insurance. Power. The capitalistic engine behind insurance companies. The pharmaceutical industry is just as powerful. So they are real players in this. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for outlining our next steps in the forum, really pursuing opportunities that would find ways to reduce prescription drug prices. Well, we've reached the end of our town hall. I want to take an opportunity to thank our panel members. Please give them a round of applause. Again, I would like to thank the Wartburg and Mr. David Gettner for allowing us to use this great facility.